such a skeptic that I don't see any one religion ever really convincing me. But I wouldn't.
I'm open-minded.
Exactly say I'm atheist
I'll listen.
either.
Make your point. Any religion, I'll listen. I've listened to many. I've gone to all the experts and they make their best case. But give me some piece of evidence, something I can hold on to that is more than just because you say so. I need something.
And something that hasn't been manipulated a bunch of times. Like that's my number one issue with the King James Bible, is that it's just that. It's King James's version of the Bible.
It's a translation from the Italian, from the Greek, from the Aramaic, and every time it changes.
And it went to German before Latin, did it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's gone through many gyrations.
And Gord knows my position on it, and everyone does. I think until they pardon my language, I think until they put "don't fuck kids" in there somewhere, I've got no use for it.
I think, for the record, I think that should be the title of the new Bible when they write another one.
You'd think it would be at least implied. Like, of the 10 Commandments, I've always been of the mindset that we don't need the 10 Commandments. I think those are 10 things that we inherently know you're not supposed to do. I don't think we need the Bible to tell us right from wrong. But you would think
you can boil it down to two things, really. You could really boil those 10 down to being honest and being nice to people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think most of them happen in the animal kingdom. I don't think we would have evolved beyond that. You know, they tend not to. Animals tend not to steal. They tend not to kill for recreation. I think we would have done fine without the 10 Commandments, or at least put some better commandments in there. Maybe expand it to like 14 and add,
get rid of a couple and add a few more.
Well, there's 613 in the Torah in the Old Testament, and then they reduced it to 10 because they were having trouble keeping track of 613 or some huge number. But if you one of my questions in the documentary is, what is morality? And what I learned about that from the psychologists is there's something that's called reciprocal altruism, which is what animals practice, like a herd of deer, for instance. If they live together in a group, in order to live in a group, you have to get along. And to get along, you've got to remember who owes you a favor, because you trade favors, you do things for each other. And if somebody in the group is not pulling their weight, then they're ostracized because they're not trading favors fairly. And when humans do the same thing, but the word we give to reciprocal altruism is morality. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, which is the Jesus version. But Jesus was actually, he had borrowed that from others like Confucius had said the same thing long before Jesus, except his version was, do not do to others what you would not want done to yourself, which is like live and let live. It's less invasive. Do unto others is like, go do unto them the way you'd want them. How do you know what they want? How do you know they want what you want? It's better to just leave people alone.
Yeah, it's a very presumptuous rule to live by. You have to presuppose you know what everybody wants, or they all want the same that you want.
And they certainly don't. Nobody does. People don't all want the same thing.
No, I wouldn't think
they
so.
certainly don't.
But even there's a old Hebrew version of the Golden Rule. It's just like, don't do what's despicable to others or something like that.
Yeah, it's a very old concept, and it goes back to reciprocal altruism, which animals and insects, other species practice. Any group that has to live, any species that has to live in a group has to practice reciprocal altruism.
So did you find...
Without it, I think it's apart.
Did you find that there's obviously in Christianity just massive contradictions? Did you find that in other religions as well? Of
course, yeah. They're all filled with contradictions because it's written over time by men who disagree with each other, and they revise and rewrite, and then old stuff gets left in and new stuff. It's certainly not a science. It's not a mathematical formula. Human beings are full of contradictions. We're all walking contradictions.
Oh, definitely. And
Now,
are you
throughout the major religions? I got to ask. Throughout the major religions, like Christianity, I believe has the most like sects of them. Like they have the most diversity of different types of Christianity throughout it, right? Who has the least? Is that something you came across? Is there like one particular religion that has like, I don't know, I guess like the least amount of, because like, a lot of people take what they can from each religion and say, well, I believe this and this, but I'm not going to follow this and this, so therefore I created this. And you have those individual little things. Is there one religion that seems to still, like I'm guessing Judaism is probably the one that you're either a full-on Jew or you're not. Is that?
Well, they've got many forms of Judaism. There's Reformed, Orthodox, different types of Orthodox, Lubavitcher. There's many types, and it's because they're not all coalescing. All the religions are not coalescing into fewer and fewer, and eventually they'll all get to an agreement. They're actually continuing to split into more and more factions, and there's more and more variations because they don't agree with each other. It's like you said. I'll take this piece and that piece, as though they think they know better than God somehow. Well, God didn't intend me to follow everything he said here. I know better. Who are you to presume that you know whatever the deity you're following, you know better than he or she knows what you should do? So that's illogical or a contradiction right there. And sexually, sex is always a big deal for religions. They're trying to control people's sexual behavior. And partly that's because it's natural for any institution to want to control reproduction, because reproduction it's a requirement. It's necessary for that group to survive. There have been religions that completely eschewed sex. Sex is terrible, no one should do it. And of course those religions died out because there's no more followers after 2 generations. But if you've got a religion that says you can't use a condom, like the Catholics, their numbers grow. And the more their numbers grow, the more their financial base grows. And so that's a much better business model.
Craziness.
Why do you think it is that this is such a silly question, but it's a genuine question. Why do you think it is that like Africans have bought into that aspect of it so much? Where they refuse to use contraception, they refuse to not procreate in massive disease, overpopulation, starvation. That's one part they seem to have latched onto and they really want to stick to.
You mean like with missionaries going around the world and bringing Christianity and teaching them to have their version of their own neurotic behaviors?
Yeah, but they seem to really just be dead against contraception, be dead against family planning, for lack of a better term.
If they're Catholics, that's the Catholic thing. Catholics, it's one of their main tenets. I mean, the United States, people are very liberalized and don't feel like they have to follow the strict Catholic beliefs. And they're not really Catholics by definition. They call themselves culturally, they're Catholics, for instance, but if they use birth control, they're not doing what the Pope has said they're supposed to do, or if they use condoms. And so it varies by culture, and it depends on, a lot of variables that are really hard to predict. Whether it's like when the missionaries would go to somewhere, what usually happens is a blending of the existing culture with the new culture that they're bringing, and you get this hybrid. You see that in South America with their version of Catholicism. You see it in the Caribbean, wherever they go, because the Catholics want to, or any religion, they want to spread, and sometimes in order to spread, you've got to maintain what feels comfortable. Like the idea of Christmas is essentially an appropriation of the pagan holiday. And there are many holidays that Christians have appropriated from the pagans because it helped gain converts at the time. And people forget now that if you actually look in the Bible, there's a passage that specifically forbids you to bring a tree that's been cut down into your house. But that's That's what people do at Christmas time, but it's specifically forbidden in the Bible. But it's and they forbade it because it was a pagan practice to remind people of the renewal of spring. Spring will come again. Life will come again. And so you have these blendings.
I have never heard of such a thing. I didn't know that was...
Oh, the Bible is so full of interesting contradictions. There's a passage in the Bible that specifically says when a human being becomes a human being, like a baby or a fetus.
Right.
It says that you don't become a person until the soul enters the body, which makes sense. You can't be a full person without a soul. And then it says that when does the soul enter the body? Well, it enters when that fetus or baby takes its first breath. The soul enters with the first breath. So prior to the first breath, it's not a person yet. And therefore, you're not aborting. Let's say you stop a pregnancy. It's not a person that you're eliminating. It's prior to the soul entering. That's specifically laid out. It's delineated in the Bible. But people aren't. It doesn't matter, right? You go with whatever you feel like, what makes you feel better, and no one really studies very accurately the belief system that they hold.
And whatever fits your ideals. If you look at like states like what Alabama's doing with abortion laws, and you can pretty much twist the Bible to say just about anything you want it to.
Sure, if you take the quote you like and ignore the others.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right.
Which is kind of my favorite thing to do, too. I mean, I do the same thing here on the show. Gord and I have a belief that I'm just about right about just about everything, and it's pretty much proven for the most part. But there's a little bit of manipulation of facts there every once in a while.
It's just a tiny.
But for the most part, I've not been proven wrong about a lot.
It's a good track record.
It's a good track record, but it's very safe. It's very insular. I don't make bets that I can't win, so to speak.
Yeah, that's why I'm on this show.
Well, then think very carefully before the next time you get married.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not against getting married again. See, my problem was the first time I got married far too young. And we just liked the idea of being the first ones to get married. We weren't really into it I don't think we understood the commitment, to be honest. The second time was just sheer stupidity. I like the idea of being married again. I like the idea of being married. I don't know that I'm good at it.
It's not a bad thing by any means. By the end of my documentary, in the Truth About Marriage, I came around to being very positive about the idea of relationships, but know what you're getting into. That's all. Learn about your partner. Learn about each other.
Of course.
What about
the idea of a relationship ending? Is it the worst thing in the world, or
no? It's not an ending. It's a decoupling is a word they use now, and you can decouple in a very positive way when you both agree that. Let's say, how long were you together in your second marriage?
Grand total of 5 years.
All right, I would call that a 5-year success.
See, that's kind of how I looked at it.
My family
tends to disagree.
I can't say that at all about my marriage.
How long? I don't even know, Gord. How long was yours?
We were together for almost 19 years. Married for 7.5 years. Together for so we were together for a long time. Ironically enough, we didn't even like each other when we got married. We really just saw a commonality, which was neither of us wanted kids. We both liked drugs and alcohol, and that's pretty much about the extent of it. And we like to get high and watch movies. That's the basis of the bulk of the relationship. And once I was kind of sick and tired of getting drunk every weekend, the marriage really started to nosedive at that point. But yeah, no, there was not a. I always was saddened to be able to look back on the relation and say, I can't think